Simple characters are boring. That's why I love the complexity of many Magic the Gathering characters. Many possible meanings can be found when we analyze the characters and their relationship to other elements within the text. Today I'm going to analyze the characters of Urza and Jace Beleren using a method known as compare and contrast in order to better understand their deeper meaning and significance. Remember that when we compare and contrast, we do so not just for the purposes of making a list of similarities and differences. That would be pointless. We examine their similarities and differences with the intent of gaining new insight into these elements, in this case, Jace and Urza, an insight that we might not be able to come up with looking at the characters in isolation. Urza versus Jace. What is the deeper meaning behind two of the most prominent planeswalkers of Magic the Gathering? Let's start with a brief overview. Urza was a master artificer and planeswalker originally from the plane of Dominaria, famous for the conflicts that he headed. Before becoming a planeswalker, he engaged in a lifelong war against his younger brother Mishra, a war so devastating that it was known by all of Dominaria as the Brothers' War, and whose conclusion was so violent and powerful it shook the very core of the plane of Dominaria itself, changing its axis and thrusting the entire land into an ice age. This was, amazingly, all while Urza was still a simple mortal. After the end of the Brothers' War, from which Mishra perished, and Urza ascended as a godlike planeswalker, Urza devoted the next 1,000 years to combating the Phyrexian Empire, who had been responsible for corrupting his brother Mishra, and who planned to invade Dominaria. Jace Beleren is a blue mage who specializes in illusions, and who has an innate gift for telepathy. Jace has often been the pawn of other, more powerful forces. As a child, his mentor, the Sphinx Alahammaret, deceived and exploited Jace throughout much of his service, and ultimately wiped most of Jace's memories of himself. So what do these two characters have to do with each other? In the storyline, Urza and Jace never met. They existed hundreds, if not thousands of years apart from one another, and their conflicts, at least so far, do not overlap. But the link I see between them is that both are arguably the most prominent and iconic planeswalkers of their respective era, each serving as a figurehead for the game of Magic the Gathering itself. Interestingly, when analyzed in relation to one another, it can be interpreted that Urza, despite his character's age, actually represents the turmoil and conflict that is typical of our teenage years, while Jace, despite his character's young age, actually embodies the conflicts of adulthood, namely those of compromise and complacency. Let's begin with the difference between active versus reactive characters. Urza is a character of action and consequence. Throughout his life, both before and after becoming a planeswalker, the decisions that he makes are the cause of his conflicts. To solve those conflicts, he directly engages them with further decisions and further actions, which is how his personal storyline progresses. Look at how Urza's choices influence the course of his life. Urza desires and demands the Meek Stone from his brother Mishra. Urza refuses to surrender his Might Stone to Mishra. Urza intentionally marries the daughter of the ruler of Yotia so that he can acquire the Thran Tome that is part of her dowry. Urza activates the Golgarian Sylex, slaughtering both his army as well as Mishra's, and ending the Brothers' War. Urza begins a quest for vengeance against Phyrexia, during which time there are countless choices and actions that Urza makes. Something that I find so fascinating about Urza is that he often makes mistakes or the wrong decisions, and that these decisions have consequences. This is often a person's experience during their teenage years. We are full of desire and ability, and we constantly act out trying to obtain that which we desire, whether it is the affections of another person or a material possession, or to demonstrate to others our own distinct personality. The teenage years are often ones that people look back on as being full of mistakes and errors of judgment. And yet, they are our mistakes to make. Our formative years where key decisions are made. Our first love, our first job, our first time slipping out from home to go out to a party. Jace, in contrast, is not a character of action, but rather one who is constantly reacting to the actions of others. From even an early age, Jace was subject to ridicule and mockery from other children. This was nothing that he invited upon himself. There was nothing he did to deserve this bullying. And it is notable that during one of the early formative events of his life, where he revealed his telepathic capabilities while being bullied, that no choice or decision on his part brought about this event. It was the bully who instigated the fight, and Jace's use of telepathy was in self-defense and therefore reactive. Reacting only in response to the actions of others turned out to be the constant throughout Jace's life. Compare the list we made of Urza's choices to the major events in Jace's life. As we already mentioned, Jace was the victim of bullying. A decision is made by Jace's parents to send him to study under the Sphinx Alhamrit. Jace's spark ignites, but then his memory of this is wiped by Alhamrit. Alhamrit attacks Jace, and Jace in turn is thrust across the plains to Ravnica with his memory wiped by his former mentor. On Ravnica, Jace is ordered by the Infinite Consortium to track down Chandra and the scroll she has stolen. Jace is manipulated by Nicol Bolas into freeing the Eldrazi. Again and again, Jace is not a character who takes action so much as a character who is constantly responding to and reacting to the whims and wills and desires and actions of others. The list goes on and on. Did Jace, after freeing the Eldrazi, devote himself to stopping this threat, to put right what he set loose? Not actually. He left Zendikar, even though he was well aware of the Eldrazi menace. It wasn't until Gideon confronted him and demanded his help that Jace returned to Zendikar to fight the Eldrazi. Again, Jace did not finally decide it was time to return. That decision was made by another, in this case Gideon. This is much more akin to the conflicts of adult life. Leaving the teenage years and early 20s behind us, we become more the sort of person that things happen to. And we are now less active people and more reactive people. You get downsized and you need to react to this change in your life. Your house goes up in value due to factors far outside your control, and now you must make the decision about whether to sell. You struggle to meet the needs of your spouse and child to help support them in your lives. Your parents grow old and need care and management. Sometimes it's a struggle just to get out and run errands, mail letters to the post office, cook dinner for the family. But welcome to your life as an adult, which also brings us to the next contrast between Urza and Jace, that of ambition and desire. Here's where I find Urza to have a great deal more complexity than Jace. Ask yourself, what does this character want and desire? What is their ambition? Their driving force. Urza seeks to save Dominaria from Phyrexia and defeat the Phyrexian ruler Yawgmoth. He is motivated first and foremost by personal revenge, brought about by the corruption of his brother Mishra, but also by the virtue of wanting to save Dominaria and the multiverse from the Phyrexian threat. With Urza, his ambition and goals are both clear and immense. He is defined by them. In contrast, let me ask you this. What is the force behind Jace? What does he hope to accomplish? What is his desire? What drives him? Again, as a character whom is largely subject to the whims and manipulations of others, Jace ends up with an underdeveloped sense of purpose. While he has a curiosity about his past and missing memories, he is far from driven by a desire to unlock his own mysteries. Jace is also the living embodiment of the Guild Pact. As such, his desire seems to be maintaining peace and order, what is tantamount to the status quo. Look at a few of these passages and ask yourself what type of job being the Guild Pact is. "How can I help you?" asked Jace, emerging into the room. "Guild Pact!" roared the Minotaurs. "The Syndicate lied about the terms of our agreement. Unfair! They're trying to disrupt our summit." Jace smiled tightly as the Golgari delegation shambled out of the room. As soon as the door shut behind them, Jace's smile dropped, and he sat down on the large wooden desk he'd finally gotten around to installing. The desk creaked, and he frowned. "Tell me that was the last for the day," he said. He groaned. It wasn't that the work was hard. Quite the opposite. It was a lot of work and hardly any challenge. "Coffee," said Jace. "The living guild pack rules that coffee is an acceptable substitution for rest, as specified in subsection whatever." "So what's it like?" asked Liliana, being the guild pack. "Exhausting," said Jace. "Everyone wants a piece of you. You're pulled in 10 different directions all the time." So this can be interpreted as an almost bureaucratic job, akin to being a mid-level paper pusher in a government office. Jace is not seeking to change anything about Ravnica. He isn't a leader, he really isn't, steering the direction and development of the plane. "But you're not the king," said Liliana. "You don't make the law, you're bound by it." He shrugged. Jace is just trying to keep the peace, trying to keep the ship afloat, as it were. From morning until night, Jace attends meetings, approves proposals, denies requests, and though there is this underlying sense of war just ready to break out between the guilds, individually the matters that he has to deal with come across as trite and mundane. Whereas Urza looked at the multiverse and rebelled against what he saw as evil, like teenagers do, Jace, on the other hand, has accepted the annoying requirements of his job and has no real ambition or desire beyond just getting his cup of coffee in the morning and getting to leave early every now and then so he can retreat to his inner sanctum and solve some puzzles. Kids watching, I've got news for you. That's called your 30s and your 40s, pretty much the rest of your adult life. But next, I want to examine the role that emotion plays for each character. Despite his towering intellect, Urza was also defined and in some cases ruled by his raging emotions. Remember that we said the key motivating factor for him was personal revenge against Phyrexia. Urza was overcome with guilt over his brother's death, once almost to the point of abandoning all defense of Dominaria. His emotional and mental sanity is often questioned by other characters such as Baron. Jace's emotions are much more muted. He's not a character driven or motivated by an emotional core. He has a job to do, and he does it. As character after character grabs him and makes demands of him, Jace sighs and does his best to meet those demands. As far as emotions are concerned, Jace is mostly motivated by trying his best to keep everyone around him happy. In the end, Urza is a teenager. Massive ambition, limitless intellect and capability, hindered by raging and uncontrollable emotions. His consequences are the result of his own actions, and he sees the world as containing great injustice and straight-out evil that he wants to stop. Yes, I am talking about Urza's rage against the Phyrexian machine. Jace, in contrast, is akin to a middle-aged adult. He has a job that he has to do, one which is largely tedious and thankless. He does not initiate action so much as react to the things that happen to him. His goal is to achieve and maintain the status quo. Jace isn't looking to shake up the system. He just wants to keep things stable and calm like most adults want for their lives as far as their families and jobs are concerned. Dreams and revolution are for the young, after all. But that's just one interpretation, one of many. What meaning do you see when you compare and contrast the characters of Jace and Urza? Let me know in the comments below. Remember, there is no such thing as an incorrect interpretation, only an interpretation that does not offer support from the text. As such, I hope that even if you disagree with my interpretation, you see wherein the storyline, the text, that I got my inferences and conclusions from. And I hope this video has been of some interest to you. You can help me out by remembering to subscribe, like, share, or just by leaving a comment. And this community college class has been brought to you by the community on Patreon that has supported me in my work. Even a donation as small as $1 really does help me keep this channel going. So thank you.